Welcome to the MIcrolite BackupEDGE video training series. The training series is designed to help you understand and get the most out of BackupEDGE. This lesson is on learning to use BackupEDGE and RecoverEDGE to create a clone of a Xinuos SCO OpenServer 507V system, but with a larger primary disk drive and root file system. By default, 507V installs with an 8 GB virtual hard drive. After boot and swap, about 5.97 gigabytes are available on the root partition. This is not enough space for many applications. Fortunately, BackupEDGE and RecoverEDGE can be used to easily resolve this problem by doing a bare metal disaster recovery to a larger virtual disk, adjusting the file system sizes as appropriate. In part 1 of this lesson, we are going to work with the original virtual machine as deployed by the Xinuos OVF template. First, we'll review the base virtual machine partitions and file systems. Then we'll set up a URL resource, in other words an FTP resource, in BackupEDGE. Next, we'll create a RecoverEDGE bootable ISO image. Then we'll create a BackupEDGE FTP backup of the entire virtual server. Please note that this procedure could also be performed using tape and/or optical media devices attached to the physical server. However, this lesson will only deal with using an FTP backup. In part 2 of this lesson, we are going to work with the replacement virtual machine. First, we'll create a new virtual machine that is exactly the same as the original, except for the hard disk size. Then we'll boot the new virtual machine using RecoverEDGE. Next, we'll configure the virtual machine partitions, looking at the possibilities provided by both the manual and automated setup processes within RecoverEDGE. And finally, we'll restore the virtual machine from the BackupEDGE FTP backup. First, let's look at the file system layout of the 507V virtual machine as deployed by Xinuos. The information in the white box is part of the RecoverEDGE hard disk report. The virtual disk size is 8 gigabytes. Of this, 30 megabytes is devoted to the boot partition. 2 gigabytes is reserved for swap space, and the rest of the virtual drive, or about 5.97 gigabytes, is used by the root file system. As boot and swap are set at optimal sizes by Xinuos, the objective will be to create a new virtual machine, leaving boot and swap the same size, while increasing the amount of space available to the root file system. First, install and activate BackupEDGE on the original server, allowing it to auto-detect the VMware Virtual CD-ROM drive, either during installation when prompted or afterwards via Edge menu. Create a URL resource. This is what a URL resource for FTP backups looks like. First, define the FTP target by either hostname or IP address. This can be any type of server or network-attached storage device, as long as it is running a properly configured FTP server and has enough free space. Next, enter the target directory or folder name. This directory must exist, be writable, and contain no other files or directories except those created by BackupEDGE. Then, enter the username and the user password on the FTP server. Next, select Test URL. If the test fails, the screen can be scrolled down to show the log and the reason for the failure. When Test URL completes, set a quota. This should be a number less than the available free space on the FTP server and more than the amount of data a backup takes times the number of backups you want to retain. Then set compression using the numbers 0 through 9 or N. The default of 5 is OK. 1 adds a little more speed at the expense of a slightly longer archive. When finished, select Next to save. Now it is time to create a RecoverEdge ISO image. First, run Edge menu and confirm that the URL or FTP resource is the primary resource. Then select Setup and Make RecoverEdge Media. From within RecoverEdge, select Image Only for Optical Zero bootable backups. And finally, at the main menu, select Generate to make the bootable ISO image. At any time during this process, you may select Print Report to actually view the hard disk layout. When RecoverEdge has completed its task and created the ISO image, copy it to your PC or to a data store on the VMware server. The ISO image can be found on the 507v server in the directory /usr/lib/edge/recover2/images, and its default name is cd-rom.iso. In part 2 of this lesson, we are going to create a new virtual machine. Our example size will be one with a 50 gigabyte virtual disk, but your needs may be slightly different, so adjust as appropriate. First, let's review the Xinuos defaults for a virtual machine from the perspective of VMware ESXi and see what might need to be changed. Xinuos defaults memory at 512 megabytes. You may add more as needed or match it. There's one virtual CPU. Again, you may add more as needed or match it. The NIC type, the network interface type, is flexible, which means to use the AMD PCNet type network host adapter. You can match this, and remember to choose the appropriate VM network. The default SCSI controller type is LSI Logic Parallel. If you haven't changed it, leave it the same here. The hard disk, again, defaults to 8 gigabytes, but you can choose a new size. When you do, select Thick Provision Eager Zeroed as the appropriate way to create the virtual hard disk. The default CD-DVD drive is set on IDE 00, which means primary master. Remember, you must match this to get the RecoverEdge ISO image to boot properly without requiring a special boot string. For guest OS, Xinuos defaults to other 32-bit. They don't use the other SCO OpenServer 5 option provided by newer versions of ESXi. And the VM version, the virtual machine version, is defaulted at 7 by Xinuos, and you could match that, or it's okay if it defaults to a higher number. Using the vSphere client, create the virtual machine with the above settings and the hard disk size you require, keeping in mind that we'll use 50 gigabytes for our example. Using the vSphere client, open the virtual console, attach the RecoverEdge ISO image, and boot the virtual machine. At the boot prompt, there are multiple options. Pressing Enter will boot RecoverEdge in default mode. This is usually just fine. Typing def bootstir space nbuff equal 5 will boot the virtual machine and allocate half of RAM to buffers, potentially increasing restore speeds. With either of these first two options, the IP address, netmask, broadcast address, and gateway address will remain the same as the original virtual machine, so make sure it is powered down. Booting with network space nbuff equal 5 will boot with larger buffers, plus allow you to set or change the IP address, netmask, broadcast address, and gateway address of the recovery session. This is most useful if the original virtual machine is to remain powered up while the new virtual machine is created. Here is the main RecoverEdge menu. From the main menu, most people choose Automatic, which automatically sizes and prepares the disk partitions, installs the boot track, and restores the backup just by pressing Enter a few times. There's also a Configure option which steps through each part of the Xinuos disk configuration tools, allowing the user to make choices. Configure is the better option in this case due to the probable disk size disparities. When the automatic restore option is chosen and the virtual hard disk size is larger than the original, two options are provided. Configure the hard drive and increase its size on a percentage basis or a size basis. Percentage is bad. All the partitions will be enlarged, including boot and swap, resulting in a huge waste of space in boot and swap unless the new disk size is only slightly larger than the original 8 gigabytes. Here's what the layout looks like, or would look like, if you chose that option. The new primary hard drive would be 50 gigabytes in size. The boot partition would be resized automatically and expanded to 187 megabytes. The swap partition would automatically have been expanded to almost 12.8 gigabytes. And the root partition would end up at 37.3 gigabytes. So too much space is wasted in boot and swap, and we can do better. The automatic size option is also bad. All partitions, including the F-disk partition, will be maintained. So the virtual machine will look the same, and a large amount of blank, unallocated space will be left at the end of the virtual drive. Again, here's what the drive would look like if the size option were chosen. The virtual disk size would be 50 gigabytes. Boot would remain at 30 megabytes. Swap would remain at 2 gigabytes. And the root partition would remain at the original 5.97 gigabytes. That would result in over 42 gigabytes of unused space. The configure option provides us with the most flexibility here. Let's walk through a manually configured recovery and see how easy it is. Select Configure, All, skip the bad track option, and RecoverEdge will ask if you want to run the F-disk utility. Say yes, and at the F-disk menu select number 2, Use Entire Disk for Unix. This will allocate all of the disk space on the virtual drive for Unix and make the F-disk partition active. Press Q, Enter to continue. And now RecoverEdge asks where to put the boot track, and we want to put it on the active partition. Next, RecoverEdge wants to run Divi. So we're going to run Divi in installation mode. The first question is how much swap space to allocate, and we'll use the original Xinuos default 2097152 or 2 gigabytes. Next, how much boot space should we allocate? And again, we'll use the original 30720, which is 30 megabytes. Do we want a separate U file system? The answer here is no, although that's an option you may choose. Now, the layout of the file systems is prepared. Do we want to make any manual adjustments? No. File systems are being made. This may take a few moments, so we're going to pause. Okay, our file systems are completely made. We're ready to continue. And so we're going to restore all file systems destructively. They're being mounted. We're defaulting to URL 0, our FTP backup. And if you haven't already, you'll be asked to initialize the network. Just say yes. Those are the previous settings. Hit OK for Enter. We're initialized, and we're ready to proceed with the restore. We're going to pause this for the original restore. When the restore is complete, you'll get a menu, and all you have to do is go back to the main menu, shut down RecoverEdge, and boot your new virtual machine. Make sure the old virtual machine was turned off before you boot the new one. Let's look at the file system layout of the 507V virtual machine after conversion by RecoverEdge. The virtual disk is 50 gigabytes. Of this, the original 30 megabytes is dedicated to the boot partition just as before. Swap space is still 2 GB just as before. But now the rest of the virtual drive, or a little under 48 GB, is used by the root file system. So we have successfully increased the size of the root file system and maximized it without changing boot or swap. Thanks for watching this lesson. Enjoy using our products. Please check www.microlite.com for additional information and more videos.